All right, greetings. My name is Vernine Mency, and I'm with the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute, the steering committee. And I want to take this time to wish Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer happy birthday, a trailblazer in her own time in voting rights, something that we need to be focused on right now within this country where rights are being taken away from folks. Mrs. Hamer was a trailblazer in assuring not only that women and people within her community, but Black folks were able to go to the polls and to vote and to look at areas within the community that needed assistance and making sure their voices were elevated in areas that helped the community to grow, elevate itself, and to expand. So at this time, happy birthday to Miss Fannie Lou Hamer. Go out and do your part and vote.
In honor of Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer's birthday, I'm making sure that my voice is heard. My name is Erica Ryan, and I am the organizer, coordinator, and part of the steering committee for the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. And I'm making sure that this election season that my voice is heard. She fought fiercely to make sure that her voice can be heard. And to honor her memory, I'm making sure that I get out to vote. I'm making sure that I inform others of their right to vote and make sure that they know where they need to go and vote. I'm assisting them in making sure that they know what their options are this election season and making sure that they realize the importance that every single vote counts. Happy birthday, Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer.
I'm Arnetta Mack, steering committee member of the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. On what would have been the 105th birthday of Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, I salute her and the sacrificial work that she did to advance voting rights for Black people in America. We continue to salute you, Ms. Hamer, by pledging to always vote and pushing others to do the same. Happy heavenly birthday.
Hello, my name's Keely, and I'm the director of the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. And October 6th is Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer's birthday. Her fight, her willingness to put her life on the line, her willingness to stand up, her willingness to get other people involved have made a significant difference in opening up the democratic process, which today is very much under attack. We need to remember, recognize, and acknowledge her contributions to the human and civil rights movement. We will be hearing from people who share that vision, that commitment, and that willingness to be involved. Thank you, and remember to vote.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be an awardee of this award by Fannie Lou Hamer, who is such a powerful ancestor within this movement, someone that I look up to, someone that I continue to leave that legacy with. And I am honored because I just joined this work, and I'm grateful to be recognized by the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. And I try to strive to make sure that our Black students aren't being criminalized and targeted within our schools, that we're able to continue our educations without being policed by police officers in our school who continue to target us. And so our victories that we receive just even recently is a power and a struggle in which we all stand for. And I'm honored to say that I've been a part of that movement. I've been a part of the change in which now we can say there's no longer school police on LAUSD campuses. Very recently, that was a vote last week, which is a great deal and a great honor for us as Black students. I will continue to keep working and make sure that our Black students are centered and that we receive the resources and the services that we deserve, because that is the legacy that Fannie Lou Hamer was speaking forth. I'm tired of being sick and tired, the struggle, the fight, it's hard, but we continue for a reason, and I will continue with this work, with this efforts. And so thank you for this award. And I'm so greatly honored to say that I can continue to carry that legacy of not only Fannie Lou Hamer, but the ancestors before us, the ancestors before me that created the stepping stone for this work. So thank you, Baba Keely. Thank you, the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. I greatly appreciate everyone here. I look up to everyone here, and I'm honored.
Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber. I only have a minute, so I want to encourage all of you all to visit the Secretary of State's website to read her full bio, also to peruse all of the awesome information she has provided to empower Californians, especially around all things voting. Dr. Weber was nominated to serve the California Secretary of State by Governor Newsom and sworn into office on January 29th, 2021. Before the appointment, Dr. Weber served 4 terms as Assembly member representing California's 79th Assembly District, which is around the San Diego area, where she went to work writing bills to bring us a more perfect union. And a fun fact, her daughter, Dr. Akila Weber, a surgeon, succeeded her after winning a special election. Dr. Weber attended UCLA, where she received her BA, her MA, and PhD by the age of 26. And before receiving her doctorate, she became professor at San Diego State University at the age of 23. She retired from the Department of Africana Studies after 40 years as a faculty member, where she was beloved. So you might be asking, where did this super she-ro hail from? Well, Dr. Weber, born to sharecroppers in Hope, Arkansas during segregationist Jim Crow era. Her father, who left Arkansas after being threatened by a lynch mob, did not have the opportunity to vote until he was in his 30s. Her grandfather never voted as custom and law in the South before the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Although her family moved to California when Dr. Weber was 3 years old, it was her family's experience in Jim Crow South that has driven her activism and legislative work. She fought to secure and expand civil rights for all Californians, including restoring voting rights for individuals who completed their prison terms. Dr. Weber embodies the spirit of Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, who was also a visionary and freedom fighter. Please help me welcome the Honorable Dr. Shirley Weber.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate being with you all this evening. It's been a long day, and it's interesting. You begin and end with the discussion of Black women. I was on the Today Show this morning, one of their digital programs, talking about Black women secretaries of state and what it means, and the generation and struggle for African Americans and African American women. So I'm grateful to be here with you, talking about my favorite person, Fannie Lou Hamer. And I'm going to tell you why in a minute, but I'm just glad to be here with Baba Akili and his efforts and his work in naming not only the Institute after Fannie Lou Hamer, but also honoring so many of you who've done the work of Fannie Lou Hamer. I'm just pleased to see all of you who have taken up the charge, who have not allowed the circumstances of the day to kill your spirit, but to continue to push forward. And I'm particularly honored to be in the presence of Jackie. I've known for many years of my husband. They were all friends for years in LA and San Diego, and just glad to see that she's still here we're working in the fields, because her father was always a warrior. Dr. Kimbrough, my kids love to go to Dr. Kimbrough's house. And in fact, my daughter did, I don't know how many research projects on his work in his house, on lawyers and doctors and all kinds of things, and won several awards as a result of that. But they just love to go to the Kimbrough's house because they had very interesting things in the Kimbrough house. Some things kind of scary in the African room, but nonetheless, they love to go there, and they love talking with their mother, Quincella, who was always the most gracious host and the most loving and wonderful person. So it's so good to see you, Jackie. Good to know that you're still working hard in LA. I was being honored at something once, and she sent me some African jewelry because she heard I was being honored. So it's just amazing to see you here looking so gracious and still on the field, still fighting the good fight. And that's what it's really all about. You know, I was on a meeting this morning, and we were talking with the National Council of Black Studies this afternoon. I think I don't know where we're in, Massachusetts or Atlanta. I can't, we're always on Zoom, so you never know where it's coming from. But I was pleased to be there as we were talking about the struggle that we face in this nation in terms of things that we want to do and the limitations sometimes that we place on ourselves with regards to our vision of how we get things done. And so I was listening because this was about the history of Black Studies and National Council of Black Studies. And we were talking about so many changes and how we sometimes give in to things and how we haven't taken the fight the way we should. And I was listening to at the president as I was listening to so many people talk about various kinds of things. And then he had to remind them that, these things are things we can do, that we come from a legacy bigger than ourselves. And that oftentimes our vision is so limited because we only see the moment rather than the whole history of Black people. And I had to and he was reminding them because he was asking they were asking some of the questions about, well, Dr. Weber, how did you get reparations done? And how did you get Black studies required? And how did you get these kinds of things? And I said, I just decided to do it. I said, I decided that the challenge faced by our ancestors was much greater than the challenge we face. That when we sometimes think about it, the hard work we have to do, we don't think about how hard it was for Black folks to do little things. And yet they still did those things. And the consequences of what they were doing was much greater than that. I think about my father who was a sharecropper, but he also owned land, and they forced you to work for white folks, even though you own land of your own. And when he tried to argue on his own behalf consistently, he became a liability. And rather than shrink like so many others, he fought back. And that fighting back cost him his life, but nonetheless, he did. And so I tell folks all the time that when somebody says, well, you authored this and the police didn't like it and this group didn't like it and you had to fight for this and fight for that, weren't you afraid? The police spent $1 million on me with regards to the bill concerning not only basically racial profiling, but most importantly, the one on lethal force. They spent $1 million trying to destroy my reputation. And they, weren't you afraid? I said, well, you know what? I said, I keep thinking about all those folks who had no protection of the law at all. We have a little bit, but they had none. If they disappeared, there would be no action taken. We think about that. And I think about the book in terms of looking at Without Sanctuary. If you haven't seen the book, you should see it. It's a book on lynching. And there's picture after picture of people being lynched and stories that are there. And people taking pictures of it, people making postcards out of it, people making all, and you know what? Not one face was covered. Not one face was covered. These people stood boldly, open-faced with their children in front of people that they had lynched and were not afraid that they'd ever be prosecuted for it. And so when you think about the environment that they existed, and you can imagine, so therefore, as Black folks took steps forward, if they came missing, there would be nothing done. There would be nothing done. And so we have to continue to understand that where we have come from, Black folks, despite the fear, despite the limitations, despite all the obstacles that were there, continued to fight. When you read the story of Fannie Lou Hamer, you should be inspired. Because Fannie Lou Hamer wasn't a person with a lot of degrees. She wasn't Shirley Weber, who could always fall back on a degree and a tenure position at the university, and therefore she could afford to be radical. She didn't have that kind of security. She didn't have any of that stuff. She could be fired and was fired after job as a sharecropper. She was persecuted as a sharecropper. She was beaten and thrown in jails, and no one rescued her. And so I say this because as we look at what we face right now, and many of you see it every day, we have nothing to shrink about. We have nothing to fear, because the folks who came before us really faced real consequences for their actions, direct consequences. And there would have been no justice. There would have been no groups marching in the streets saying Black Lives Matter. There would have been no protest. There would be no concept of no justice, no peace. They would just be gone. And I say that consistently to young people because oftentimes we look at the challenge we face right now in this country and we shrink. We think it's too much. It's too overwhelming. It's difficult. Yeah, Fannie Lou Hamer said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. but she never got too tired to stop fighting. She may have been tired of the consequences and the things that she was going to face, but she never stopped fighting. And I say that because most of us right now face probably the greatest peril of our life as we look across the country. You know, some of us don't remember the kind of racism that people suffered in the 60s and the 70s. Some of them don't remember what happened to the Panthers when they came out and the people who were killed and shot, and they only see it on the movies. They have no concept at all about it. But Fannie Lou Hamer was a living example of what it was like to basically commit yourselves and to fight and to fight and to fight. And now we face one of the greatest fights of our lives, because everything we've known that we have valued, everything we've thought about in terms of our voting rights and feeling very secure in this country, that we know what we're doing and that we have been protected by the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that has all been poofed away just like that. And the question is then, what are we going to do? We have to fight. We have to continue to fight. We have to educate. We have to register people to vote. We in California have opened up the franchise to voting to everyone except for the few people who are sitting in state and federal prisons, which means every person walking the streets of California who is a citizen should be registered to vote. And despite the fact that across the nation, people are creating laws and they're trying to do the same thing in California through the initiative to stop us, so many of us, from voting, we must vote like we've never voted before. So we can say to them with certainty that no matter what you put in front of us, no matter how you try to change the game on us, no matter how you try to discourage us, we are still going to vote. We're going to fight and vote like we've never voted before. Why? Because we believe, like Fannie Lou Hamer believed, we may be sick and tired of being sick and tired. We're tired of these folks constantly harassing us, trying to take it back, but we will never, ever stop. And so I want to honor those today who live in the spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer. You know, this is a sister, when I read her bio, and I read it years ago when I was an undergraduate, I was immediately inspired about her. And I've seen the videos. And like I said, today I was on a panel talking about Black women leaders in Black studies. And what did we see? We saw Fannie Lou Hamer. We saw the picture, the video of Fannie Lou Hamer giving her testimony before Congress. And we saw that LBJ was so afraid of this sister because she had not just a voice, he was more afraid of her than King, because she was a living embodiment of the struggle and the perseverance and the determination. And she was an example that you could do nothing to her to stop her from fighting for justice. And so what did he do? He came on television and broadcast his speech the same time Fannie Lou Hamer was speaking for the Democratic Party. And the interesting thing was the press picked up on it and began and blasted her speech all day long and all the next day, because they were saying, look at this woman who is speaking the truth that the president of the United States is so afraid of, that he's trying to stop her from talking. You talk about power. This is a sister who didn't graduate from high school, who was articulate and powerful, but didn't have the skills and the knowledge and the resources to do the things, but she knew what she wanted. And she knew why she wanted to vote. And she knew how important she was in terms of the whole movement. And she knew that she could not stop, because if she had, it would stop. And so she continued to push forward. I want to celebrate you sisters and brothers who are doing just that work, who did not let the circumstances of life stop you, did not say, oh, well, we don't own enough money. What can we do with Crenshaw? What can we do in this area? What can we do? You decided that you had the ability to basically change the life of people in Los Angeles, and you did. And you took the charge. And as a result of that, you became a role model for others who want to say, you can't fight these people. The answer is yes, you can. And you must, because our entire future relies on us being able to look at the circumstances, understand the threat, but also understand the legacy upon which you stand, that our people faced even greater threat than what we face today. And despite that, they never stopped. They never stopped pushing. They never stopped fighting. And they got us to where we are. And it's our responsibility now to take the legacy and move forward. This is our time. There's no more celebration of King in the past and all. That's fine. But it means absolutely nothing if we do not continue the struggle, because then we make mockery of the journey that they were on for our behalf. So I want to thank you, Akili, for having this Fannie Lou Hamer Institute, for inviting me to be with you this evening. We're in difficult times, but as I tell everybody with regard to the Secretary of State, I said my goal is to fight for justice and equality, and I want to fight till hell freezes over, and then we're going to put on our skates and fight some more. And when I said that, I was in DC, and someone said, "You folks don't have snow in California," and I had to remind them that California has everything. That's why we fight so hard. That's why we work so hard to be a role model for the rest of the nation, because we have snow, we have sunshine, we have mountains, we have lakes, we have rivers, we have deserts. California has it all. And that shocked them. I said, we're not just a sunshine state. We are a complete nation in ourselves if we choose to be. And as a result of that, we believe very strongly that as California goes, so goes the nation. And we will definitely lead in all of these areas that is so critically important. Thank you so very much for having me with you this evening. Congratulations to all the honorees. And once again, Akili, congratulations on this development of this institute and the tremendous work that you continue to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Weber.
Good evening. My name is Sandy Cook, and I'm on the steering committee of the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. And it's my honor to introduce to some and present to others the recipient of the 2021 Fannie Lou Hamer Institute Legacy Award, Bobby Jean Anderson. Like Ms. Hamer, Bobby Jean is a political leader and a staunch advocate for social justice in our community here in South Los Angeles. And her impact is across the state and the nation. If you know Bobby, you know that she never wanted to shy away from fighting for and organizing people who too often found themselves powerless and disenfranchised to demand for justice and fair treatment on many issues that disproportionately plague Black communities. Bobby Jean retired after 40 years of dedicated service with the County of Los Angeles. And she is also a longtime labor activist with SCIU Local 721. She is a part of the Democratic Party leadership nationally, state, and county-wide, and in her local community. She serves on the Democratic National Central Committee Executive Board. She is the former vice chair of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. She served as president of New Frontier, the oldest Black Democratic club in California, and she currently serves as a trustee. She has been appointed to state and local commissions. She even ran for council, just like Mrs. Hamer ran. When we think of Mrs. Hamer, we think of Bobby Jean Anderson, who stands on her shoulders. We could say so much about Bobby's accomplishments and leadership, but I'm sure that she would agree that her greatest accomplishment is her family. Her son, Andy, 2 grandchildren, Anthony and Desiree, and 1 great-granddaughter, Jalen. Bobby Jean is a member of Greater Ebenezer Missionary Baptist Church. Congratulations, Bobby Jean Anderson, our 2021 Fannie Lou Hamer Institute Legacy Award recipient. We honor you and we are grateful for all of you have done and continue to do in our struggle for freedom and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for that introduction. I appreciate it. And I want to thank and congratulate the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute on their first event. And I congratulate all of the honorees that came before me today. This is a worthwhile institute. I can tell you that because I have been a Fannie Lou Hamer person most of my life. I'm incarnated, I would say. In high school, I was the quiet one. I know people can't see me that way, but I was kind of withdrawn, and I would go in the library. My sister, who was a year behind me, her and her friends would always call me the bookworm because I read a lot. I stayed to myself. And even as I grew into adulthood, I still studied Fannie Lou Hamer. I read a lot about her. I would give book reports on her in high school. And I was just drawn to her. And actually, I ended up finding my own voice through Fannie Lou Hamer. And that's why I became the person that I am today, because I believe I mimicked her, and she just gave me that strength to, persevere and do what I needed to do. And what happened with me, I was never one to join a crowd. I would, travel by myself. Uh, but when I would see things that were wrong, and back in the day, I'd say in the 70s, when, and let me just mention this, I am the octogenarian in this group today. So I have been in the struggle a long time, and I continue to struggle. Um, I can't do as much now as I did before, but I think my work speaks for itself. And, I can use my voice as much as I can now. But my mother used to say, because when I would see something that was wrong, if I would see boys fighting or any group fighting, I'd get in the middle of them, part them, just, didn't even think about it. And when I would see policemen, like, taking advantage of young kids or either adults, as they chose to do, I had no problem. And my mother would say to me, I look to hear one day get a call that the police have killed you. But in those days, I don't know if anybody else had that experience, but all they would say to me, I would jump on their back to try to get them off of a person that they were beating up. I'd try to pull their stick out of their hand, and they would just say to me, "Ma'am, you better get out of the way, or we're gonna arrest you." And I would just not stop until they let that man go. If you're gonna take him to jail, take him to jail. And I did that several times, and my mom was just so worried that, and I understand now, but you can probably appreciate today if I would do that, it wouldn't take me long. I'd be gone. But those are the kind of things that I would just do that on my own. I was just drawn to do what was right and to get involved and to speak up. And I thought about when I saw George Floyd being choked to death right there in our sight. If I had been there, I feel that I probably would have thrown a rock. I would have done something. I couldn't have just stood still to watch. That's not in my blood to do that. And I think that I found that voice within me from just studying Fannie Lou Hamer and admiring the things that she had done. I saw her in real time, naturally on TV, because I wasn't at the places where she was speaking. But I, really just kind of lived through her and her works and just followed her and continued to follow her examples as she's left. And I just, I can't say enough about Fannie Lou Hamer. People have called me and have me to come and speak. I've gone to Cam, to Yvonne has been there when they've called me to come and, be a person to represent Fannie Lou Hamer when they were honoring her during Black History Month and stuff like that, because people just know my connections with the person. I don't know her personally. I've never met her, but I just admire what she has done and what her legacy continues to heap upon us and keep us moving forward. And again, I just want to thank Akili. I don't think about being honored for anything, because I just do things because that's what I think needs to be done at the time. And when people call me to say that they want to honor me, I'm really humbled by that, because that's not, what I do in life. I do stuff because I see that it needs to be done. And I will take a chance on doing something, even if I jeopardize myself sometimes. So, and a few people on this, in this group here knows, that I'm kind of that way. So politically, I also take, stands. I went to Washington, D.C. for Clinton's briefing on his crime bill. And as you guys know, that was the mandatory minimum sentence and controversy that we all had. Congresswoman Maxine Waters brought me there to Washington to speak out against that and others. It was a delegation of us that came from her district. And stuff like that. I went up and down the state speaking against the 3 stragglers laws. And so I'm just an activist in my heart. And I just think that it was there all the time. But until I really made the contact with Fannie Lou Hamer, again, I would say that I found my voice. And the work that I've done, all of it, has probably been inspired by her. And again, I want to thank you. I don't want to overspeak. I asked Akili how long, I'm not a speaker anyway, how long I had to speak. So I thank you all again for honoring me. And I appreciate that you have found this institution. I will do everything that I can to help.
Good evening. I'm Arnetta Mack, Steering Committee member of the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute, Program Director for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California, and President of the National Council of Negro Women, View Park Section. It gives me great honor to introduce Reverend James Lawson. Reverend Lawson is an activist and university professor. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that Reverend Lawson was the leading theorist and strategist of nonviolence in the world. During the 1960s, he served as a mentor to the Nashville Student Movement and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Reverend Lawson made critical and lasting contributions to the Black freedom movement. Tonight, we will hear some of his awesome reflections on the life of Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer. I present Reverend James Lawson.
I commend that you are being recognized by the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. There is probably, in my mind, no better way for you to be honored than through the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. So I can commend you, tell you to keep up the work and deepen and enlarge your work. By 1952, after 8 years of studying nonviolence in Africa, Asia, Europe, United States, I knew that we were going to have a Black movement in the United States that would begin the battle to stop Jim Crow law and segregation. So I moved south to begin working with Martin Luther King Jr. and the emerging nonviolent movement. In those travels, I did hear about Fannie Lou Hamer. My earliest knowledge of her was that as a daughter of a sharecropper, her family and she got kicked off of their farm by the owner of the farm because she saw the owner on his invoice cheating the father, and she said so. So that indicated to the extent to which at a very early age she was committed to justice and fairness. When in June of 1963, by bus, they were coming from Georgia back to home in Mississippi. In Winona, Mississippi, the sheriff picked all 3 of them up, took them to the Winona, Mississippi jail, and beat them almost to death. Fannie Lou Hamer, Elnell Ponder, and June Johnson. Elnell Ponder, shortly after that, died from those injuries. Fannie Lou Hamer was severely injured, but did manage to live another 10 years or so. In that jail beating, this white sheriff also forced Black men who were jailed to beat the women. So it's not only white sheriffs who did the beating, but Black jailed prisoners were forced to beat them too. In the 1970s, in the last 4 or 5 years I was in Memphis at Centenary United Methodist Church, each year I would invite Fannie Lou Hamer to come up and speak to the congregation because she was back in Ruralville between her travels. She had a wonderful voice as a singer. Had she had access to education, Fannie Lou Hamer could have become one of the great, great, great voices of the century. From my perspective, the voice was that good. In the Mississippi movements and campaigns, she was one of the great singers as well as one of the great leaders. She was one of the symbols and icons of the Mississippi Freedom Party, which was a result of the coalition of the NAACP, SNCC, SCLC, and the Congress on Racial Equality. They formed the Mississippi movement. She would be considered today in Mississippi one of the icons of that movement. I would consider her one of the icons across the whole movement. I do not call that movement the Civil Rights Movement. I call that movement what Congressman John Lewis called it, the Nonviolent Movement of America, or what the historian Vincent Hardy called the Black Freedom Movement. So when we call it the Civil Rights Movement, we are failing to both grasp what civil rights movement means and to understand what happened in the 20th century, the nonviolent movement of direct action. And that included work from a whole millions of people in the South. That included a whole lot of Black folk, a lot of organizations, new organizations and old organizations like the NAACP. But in the whole struggle, the engine that produced the awakening in America should be called the Nonviolent Movement of America. And sometimes I call that the Rosa Parks Martin Luther King movement, 1953 to 1973. And that movement is therefore one of the big campaigns of the civil rights movement. Civil rights movement is the omnibus term of a great variety of things. And so I push very hard for understanding that history and not allowing it to be revised by historians and academics and writers.
Woke up this morning with my mind stay on freedom. Oh, woke up this morning with my mind stay on freedom. Oh, woke up this morning with my mind stay on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Walking and talking with my mind. Stay on freedom. Oh, walking and talking with my mind. Stay on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind. Stay on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Singing and praying with my mind. Stay on freedom. Oh, singing and praying with my mind. Lord, 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 stay on freedom. Singing and praying with my mind. Stay on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Let's walk. Come on and walk.